Okay, guys, so part two of the lecture on the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire. Um, Cortes and his men have been invited into Tenochtitlan by Montezuma, the Aztec Tlatoani, the emperor, right? And the Indian allies are left out on the shores of the lake. You know, the emperor is not fool enough to invite an entire army into the capital. If it's 600 men, he's not concerned with, okay, because he's got more than enough warriors in the capital to deal with them if they prove to be some sort of a problem. So that's not a worry. He's not going to invite an army of 20, 30,000 guys into Tenochtitlan, but 600 men, that's fine. Now, before we go any further, though, I'd like you to look at this map. This is the best map that I've found online with all of my searching around of the Aztec Empire to give you a real sense of this thing. I mean, I've been talking about it with the Aztec Empire, but what was the Aztec Empire? So let's just stop for a moment, kind of take a look at this thing that, Montezuma is in charge of and that Cortes is trying to get his hands on, right? So here you have the sort of full boundaries of the empire in a sense, okay? Now, border states. Okay, these are kingdoms that are either on the periphery of the empire, okay, or that are independent states like the Tlaxcalan Confederacy that are within the empire. Okay, the Tlaxcalans, like the Teotitlanos, okay, these are kingdoms or confederacies where the Aztecs realize it's just going to be so problematic to conquer them that rather than try to beat them down and then have this rebellious people, right here within the middle of our empire that are always going to be a big pain in our neck, we're just going to create a treaty with them where they'll be tributaries to the empire and they'll exist within the empire. They'll be in charge of themselves. They'll pay us tribute. They'll provide us with warriors, on our campaigns and so on and so forth. So that's what that's all about, okay? These light green areas, tributary provinces, these are peoples that have been conquered by the Aztecs. They are, part of the empire, okay? And then, these other areas that are colored up in a certain way, these are related to the website where this map came from, and we're not going to get all into that because that's delving too far into the politics of the Aztec Empire and its relationships with the various tribes and kingdoms and confederacies, etc. That's more than we want to sort of try to sort out, all right? But here you have, give me just a moment, here's the Lake of Mexico and the Valley of Mexico. Tenochtitlan is right here, that little red dot, okay? And then basically Cortes came from off over here. Veracruz, this is where Veracruz is today, came off this way to get to the Valley of Mexico. So this is where the main action is now going to be playing out, okay? This is where Mexico City is now. But anyway, all right. So here you have a better map. It's a littlest bit blurry. That's the best resolution I can get for you. But here's the Lake of Mexico, the Valley of Mexico, right? Teotihuacan up here, the meeting place of the gods. Here you have the island city of Mexico, or Mexico, Tenochtitlan. This is where Mexico City is today. The lake is essentially all gone, or 99% of it is. There's a little bit of it left in the great urban sprawl. Well, Mexico City today covers basically all of this, okay? And there's a little bit of the lake left in an area called Xochimilco, okay? These lines that you see, these are the causeways or the raised bridge, like walkways or roadways that the Aztecs had created to connect their island kingdom to the shores of the lake, okay? And then every one of these spots you see, like Texcoco, for example, these are cities or city-states located around the lake, which by this point have all been absorbed into or conquered by the Aztecs, right? Here you have a map of Tenochtitlan, which is from the Florentine Codex. It was created by the Spanish It doesn't make a whole lot of sense from our point of view, looking at it now as a kind of map to make, sense of. But again, you get the sense of how, Tenochtitlan was not just an island, but a sort of big core central island with a connection of islands created by the Chinampas, and then the causeways connecting Tenochtitlan to the mainland. And this water is not meant to represent this entire Great Lake, but this sort of interior lake here that was disconnected from the rest of the lake by this dike that the Aztecs had created to create a fresher area of water from the more brackish or stagnant water of the rest of the lake. Okay, so that's what this body of water is meant to represent. Here's a painting, again, the littlest bit blurry, again, sort of showing the sprawl. It's a modern day painting, okay, of what Tenochtitlan looked like. Another one similar, from very similar kind of perspective, okay, a little bit better. The great sort of central area of the Zocalo and the sacred center with the main temples to the, the sort of central gods of the Aztecs, the Huitzilopochtli, Quetzalcoatl, Tezcatlipoca, and so on and so forth. Okay, you can see all the canals, right, that sort of crisscross the city, where all the main traffic would sort of move by way of canoes and various watercraft. That's the way they transported most of their major cargo. Okay, and then again, the causeways connecting the city to the mainland, and then off in the distance, you see the dike, okay, that separated the fresher water from the more brackish water of the rest of the big, lake. Okay, a similar kind of image. I'm just trying to give a real sense of what we're talking about here when we talk about Tenochtitlan. Here's the dike, okay, the brackish water and the fresher water that the Aztecs could use, for a certain percentage of their, not so much the drinking water, but more like water for cooking and bathing and everything. They got most of their drinking water from a big aqueduct that brought fresh water from the hills off up in here in the distance, and a big aqueduct that came down into the city. Okay, now here's an image by John T. Snyder. I'm going to show you a bunch of images here, illustrations and paintings, to give you a sense of what Tenochtitlan looked like. We have a pyramid here with the temple on top. The pyramid was not a temple. The temples sat on top of the pyramid. So not every temple was on a pyramid, but the biggest temples to the most important gods were. Okay, another kind of map showing you the aqueduct, or not the aqueduct, pardon me, but the dike. Okay, and then the causeways. And then I don't know what these lines are meant to represent. The map, or the site where I got this map of the internet, it's actually from a German site on Mesoamerica, so trying to make heads or tails out of what they were talking about, forget about it. No clue what's going on there. Here's a scale model of the sacred ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan, the precinct of the most important gods and their temples. This is actually at the ruins of the remains of Tenochtitlan and the Templo Mayor, this temple. Pyramid and temple, which is in downtown Mexico City. Here again, a painting of, downtown Tenochtitlan, the ceremonial center. This is a detail from one of Diego Rivera's great murals, the marketplace at Tenochtitlan. Then back here in the distance, you can see the sacred ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan. And then this is actually the aqueduct bringing the fresh water into the city. In that distance, you can see the volcanoes. On the far side of those volcanoes and mountains will be Puebla and Cholula. Here's an even closer in detail of this part of the mural there. So you can see the aqueduct here. Okay, and then again the canals, right, that crisscross the city, the Templo Mayor, other temples to the greater and lesser gods. You get the idea. Okay, This is a detail from a mural in Tlaxcala, which I showed you earlier in the first part of the presentation by Desiderio Hernandez Xochitiotzin. Okay, this is actually the marketplace in Tlaxcala, but it gives you just a sense of what Rivera was showing you, but in a more modern mural with a little better detail. Some images by Don Crane from the 1920s, again of what Tenochtitlan might have looked like. Pretty awesome. Pen and ink and watercolor. Okay, and then this is really interesting. This is a place in the state of Nayarit, Mexico, and this little town called Mezcaltitan. Okay, so it's a little island in this lake district in Nayarit that where basically the little town is built right out to the rim of the island, and it's kind of famous because it's considered to be sort of like representative of what Tenochtitlan might have looked like in miniature, without, of course, the enormous, pyramids and tremendous stone edifices, okay? But you get this kind of sense of what this little, like island town, a sort of microcosmic view of what, Tenochtitlan or a piece of Tenochtitlan might have looked like, right? It's like, I'd love to visit this place, in person, not just see these pictures of it, but kind of cool, like, here, what the Lake of Mexico might have looked like way back in the day, or like when the Aztecs were just starting out before they expanded and made it into a bigger and bigger piece of real estate with the use of the chinampas, like kind of magical spot. I hope to visit there someday. We'll see. There's another view of it. Okay. All right. But anyway, the Spaniards are given the best rooms in the palace and treated as honored guests, wined and dined and given women and shown around the city to all of the main sites and the great tourist spots. They're taken to the zoo. And I mean, literally, I'm not like, making like a joke here, Disneyland, and no, but there was a zoo in Tenochtitlan and a botanical gardens and a great library. And so they're taken to see everything that's just spectacular, wonderful, because again, remember, there's this belief that Cortes is the return god, Quetzalcoatl. So it's like, hey, we want to show you everything that's great, like, yeah. So they take him to everything, and it's wonderful. It's a city of gold, right? Yeah. But, at the same time, from the Spanish point of view, some of it's not so great. Not from their point of view, at least. Because they're taken also, to the sacred ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan, to the pyramids, the temples, and they climb up to the top of a pyramid, to the temple of Coatlicue. And there they are confronted with the evidence of generations of human sacrifice, because the Aztecs don't clean everything up after each sacrifice. They leave it, everything, all messy, bloody. Okay, so the stones have the residue of well over 100 years of blood worked into every crack, crevice, and pore of the stones. The inside of the temple smelled like a slaughterhouse, okay, where they slaughter animals, dozens, hundreds of animals every day. That's what the Spanish said later. That's the exact description that they used. Some of them kind of reeled outside into the sun like it literally puked up their guts, okay? I mean, they ran out of the temple and, okay? Which, of course, was a great insult to the Aztecs. They're taking them into their holiest of holy places, and then the visitors are running outside and puking, okay? And to make matters worse, from the Spanish point of view, there was the statue of Coatlicue herself, 9 feet tall, 2 rattlesnake heads, clawed hands and feet, a girdle or skirt made of serpents, okay, all hanging down, right? Here's the serpents, and the clawed feet and hands, okay, over here, right? Okay, and the necklace of skulls, hands, and hearts, rattlesnake heads, okay? For these devoted Spanish Catholics, this was like the den of Satan himself. I mean, their reaction, was disconcerting for the Aztecs, because it made them ask themselves, if this was supposed to be the very god Quetzalcoatl returned and his retinue of supernatural assistants, then how could it be that they would be revolted and turn away from evidence of blood sacrifice, which was what all of the gods, including Quetzalcoatl, demanded as their just due from humanity? In other words, they're like, what's going on here? I mean, who are these guys, right? Clearly, this made them suspicious, bothered them, gave them some, real anxiety and raised questions in their mind, okay? Well, at any rate, the Spaniards spend 5 months, cinco, in Tenochtitlan, enjoying the hospitality of the Aztecs, biding their time, getting the lay of the land, just sort of trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do here? And, just trying to get a sense of things, okay? And then a messenger arrives from Veracruz, where Cortes had left a handful of men to maintain his beachhead position at the coast. The message says that a Spanish expedition has arrived from Cuba under the command of Panfilo de Narvaez, another fired-up young fellow looking to prove himself, a guy much like Cortes, okay? He's been sent by Governor Velasquez to bring back Cortes's expedition, with Cortes himself in chains for having disobeyed the orders of the governor. You remember Cortes was not supposed to leave, and he snuck out under cover of darkness, saying, I'm getting the hell out of here, and I'm going to make this thing happen. And, well, now somebody's been sent to arrest him, right? So Cortes quickly formulates a plan and departs for Veracruz with enough men to achieve what he has in mind, leaving his second in command, Pedro de Alvarado, in charge of the forces left behind in Tenochtitlan. Now, Alvarado, if you recall, I think I've already mentioned this, maybe I haven't, was a 7-foot colossus, okay, legendary, not only for his size, strength, and ferocity in battle, but also for being something of a homicidal maniac, okay? Now, these are excellent qualities in a second in command, as long as you can keep the guy under control, but not necessarily the combination of personality traits that you want running the show in a pressure cooker like the palace at Tenochtitlan. And a pressure cooker is just what it had become, okay? But more on that in a minute. Now, in Veracruz, Cortes is able to achieve exactly what he'd hoped, which is to say that he sneaks in under cover of darkness, he makes contact with his men, he's able to defeat Narvaez, and then in a parley with his forces, he tells them what he's got cooking in Tenochtitlan, which is basically, Aztecs, city of gold, more riches than you've ever dreamt of in your life, enough gold and other spoils to make us all wealthy, and commanderos, just join up with me and you'll never work another day in your life. God, glory, and gold, viva el rey, long live the King of Spain, okay? This guy's the ultimate opportunist. He not only defeats the force that was sent to take him back to Cuba in chains, he does it with almost no bloodshed, and he turns the men in that force to his own cause, even as he puts their commander in chains and throws him in prison for the next 2 years, ties him up and chucks him, in jail basically here in Veracruz, and has the guys that he leaves there, hold the dude, okay? Basically tied up for the next 2 years. Okay, now, meanwhile, things have gone seriously wrong while Pedro was minding the store back in Tenochtitlan. Okay, remember the pressure cooker? Well, what I was referring to is that many of the Aztecs, after 5 months of living with the Spanish in the palace, now they've got serious doubts as to whether Cortes is a god or any of these guys are supernatural beings of any kind at all. They just don't act like gods. In fact, they act an awful lot like men, right? they overeat, they fart and belch, they chase women, they snore, and the Aztec warriors have become so disdainful of them that they've started to show their disrespect in ways that the Spanish are starting to pick up on, okay? And what I mean disrespect is like when they pass the Spaniards in the hall, they're not just like giving them dirty looks, they're like giving them the serious like bump, you know, and the Spanish say, hey, cabron, what? You know, the Aztecs are like, oh, like, what, dude? You know, and put their hand on their sword like, you want to start something? You know, and then the Spaniards are like, no, you know, okay, you know, because the thing is, it's not that the Spaniards are cowards or anything, but they're in the middle of a city of 250,000 people, outnumbered warrior to warrior by like, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 to 1. So it's like, no, senor, my fault entirely. You know, I mean, they're nervous, you know, because they can tell that things are getting a little uneasy, and the Aztecs are starting to show them more and more disrespect, like I say, so they're not sure what's going to happen, okay? Now, if things get ugly and go sideways, it's easy for them to see that things might not go well for them. So one night, while Cortes is away, in the palace, a group of Aztec nobles are having a celebratory feast honoring their patron god, Huitzilopochtli, which involves them being dressed in their warrior garb and engaging in ritualistic dancing with swords and shields. Okay? Now, this is just down the hall from the quarters of the Spanish, who are already paranoid about being attacked, right? So they see what's going on, you know, in this big room just a little ways away from them, and they misinterpret it as preparations for an assault on them. And they decide to launch a preemptive attack, okay? Now, under the leadership of, again, a homicidal maniac named Pedro de Alvarado, okay? They end up slaughtering all of the noblemen at this feast, and all those guys were doing was basically having a big party. Dinner, dancing, and a party, okay? Word of this gets out into the city. By the time Cortes gets back to Tenochtitlan, the palace is surrounded and under siege by tens of thousands of angry Aztecs crying out for justice for the killing of their people. But Cortes is a guy with a way with words, and he's able to smooth talk his way into the palace along with all of the men he has with him. And he's brought back about 1,500 guys with him. Once inside, he gets the scoop from Alvarado and also discovers that they have one very valuable bargaining chip. The Tlatoani, Montezuma, is in there with them, and he can be used as a hostage if push comes to shove, right? So, a few weeks goes by, and the siege continues. They're surrounded. The Spanish can't get out. The Aztecs can't get in. Finally, Cortes decides that the emperor should address his people, and maybe he can diffuse the situation in some way. So he sends Montezuma out to speak to the throng of Aztecs gathered outside the palace. The Tlatoani spoke to his people from some kind of a balcony or a rampart of the palace. It's hard to say for certain. And he says the predictable sort of thing. Look, you need to go back home. Everything is under control. All will be made well in the fullness of time, and justice will be served, etc. You can imagine the kind of things Cortes wanted him to say. That's what he says. His appearance and his remarks lead directly to his death. But what is the precise manner of Montezuma's death anyway? Well, we don't really know. That's the thing. There's two different versions of the story. The first version is that the emperor's words were met by jeers and catcalls from the crowd. Yeah, come on, get out of here, you bozo. What are you talking about, right? Along with thrown stones, maybe some fruits and vegetables. But it was a stone that did him in. Hit him on the forehead. He was knocked back. But the blow was a mortal one, and he died from it inside the palace sometime later. He had his head caved in when he got hit by a big rock. Okay, now, the other version of the tale is that Cortes stabbed him in the side, torso, or the groin. The codex that tells this tale is unclear. But after the emperor had spoken with the people, this wouldn't seem to make a lot of sense. In fact, it makes no sense whatsoever. Montezuma, from Cortes's point of view, was his only bargaining chip. What possible motive could he have for killing him? And Cortes was no Alvarado. He was not a homicidal maniac. He was not a man to act out of blind emotion, but a cunning, calculating opportunist who never made a move, or a movie, sorry, bad typo there, without thinking 5 moves ahead. For the life of me, I cannot see why he would have killed Montezuma at this juncture. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Now, if you look at this image from the codex in question, you see Cortes here with Montezuma. He has a rope around his neck, like he's got him so like he can't jump over the edge and commit suicide or something like that. There's endless speculation over the centuries about what this actually means. Here is the image of Montezuma having been stabbed by Cortes with information relating to this. Okay, some have asked the question, okay, was Montezuma hit in the head and then dying, and then Cortes put him out of his misery? But then why would he have stabbed him in the side or the groin? If anything, wouldn't he have like just cut his throat or stabbed him in the heart? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. However, this is good reason to think the Aztecs may have stoned Montezuma with intent to harm and even slay, because their laws stated that if a Tlatoani were not fulfilling the will of the gods, that he could be removed by the people and a new Tlatoani could be installed. You know, like in the United States, popular sovereignty, government of the people, by the people and for the people, right? The people that run our country run it because we allow them to. Not through the will of the gods, but they're in charge for us. So what is it that they might have perceived here? The Tlatoani being controlled with a rope around his neck as the puppet of foreign interests, not gods, mere men from a distant land who had killed their nobleman. He was no longer really their leader, but a shill, a puppet. So in their anger, might they have not stoned him? I mean, doesn't that make sense? Even if they weren't trying to kill him, just angry, like, get out of here, you bozo, you know, throwing a rock at him. Okay, over here you have this painting by Charles Ricketts, you know, that Montezuma was shot by an arrow. That just didn't happen. Ricketts was ill-informed, or he just purposefully wanted to have it seem more dramatic, shot by an arrow. Well, it didn't happen that way. Okay, but anyway, such a thing has happened innumerable times throughout history, so why not here? This version of events is plausible, even persuasive, but you'll have to persuade yourself, okay? Chicanos, ethnic nationalists, generally seem to have a hard time accepting that the Aztecs did their own emperor in. They want the evil conquistador as the fall guy, which is all well and good, but again, in the words of my sainted grandfather, a dog don't hunt. It just doesn't really make sense. But one way or another, with Montezuma dead, Cortes knew that their number was up, that it was now only a matter of time before the Aztecs mustered overwhelming force, stormed the palace, and snuffed the Spaniards out to the last man, and all of his grand plans of God, glory, and gold would go a-glimmering. And so that very night, June 30th, July 1st, 1520, La Noche Triste, the sad night, legendary in the annals of Mexican history. He decided to seize the opportunity. Cortes is good at this, sneaking out under cover of darkness, right? While the Aztecs might still be confused and in disarray, and escape from the city. The Spaniards had to fight their way from the palace precincts and across the city, and then down and across one of the causeways to the shore of the lake. At first, they were only impeded by the sheer mass of people in front of them, because the palace had not been under siege by warriors so much as by ordinary citizenry. But as the cries rang out, more and more soldiers began to join the fight, and then it became a real struggle for every foot and yard they could gain. The steel weapons and armor of the Spanish carried the day in this close quarter fighting, and their firearms certainly were of no little advantage in terms of shock and awe, for these were not fights on broad battlefields where the enemy could come at them from all sides, but through city streets with buildings on both sides. This gave the Spaniards time to reload and use their guns time and again. The Aztecs knew how to use their city against the enemy, and they drew up the wooden bridges that crossed the canals, in advance of the Spaniards, forcing them to leap the canals in full armor. Many of the Spaniards were so weighed down by the gold they carried, and which they refused, a lot of them, to relinquish, that they could not make the jumps, and instead they fell into the water to be drowned beneath the dual weight of armor and gold, right? Their greed sucked them down. I mean, hard enough just to swim, under the weight of armor. Essentially impossible, right? As Jaime Lannister discovered on Game of Thrones, Season 7. If you guys watch the show, man. Dude would have drowned if Bronn hadn't gone and dragged his ass up. And even that was impossible, but whatever. I almost stopped watching the show. That irritated me so much. But anyway, now, here you've got some images, again, of La Noche Triste, the Spaniards, doing their best to fight their way out at Tenochtitlan, At the last, one of these canal jumps, Alvarado and a couple of other guys were holding the rear guard against the pursuing Aztecs. And finally, it was down to only Pedro, the homicidal maniac, 7 feet tall, this colossus. And he turned and ran, got speared in the leg, and knowing he was unable to make a good leap, he grabbed up a lance that somebody had dropped, a spear, and using it as a makeshift pole, dude went full-on Olympics, and he pole vaulted across, if you can imagine this, landing in a shower of spears on the other side. The Aztecs didn't get him, but he got away clean, man. I mean, the world's luckiest homicidal maniac. I would love to see a movie of this. I mean, can't you imagine that on the big screen? Why hasn't somebody made a movie about Cortes and the conquest of the Aztecs? It's beyond me. It's the greatest thing in history that nobody's ever made a movie about. Anyway, now, the Spanish escaped the city, and they finally get to a place where they can stop for a breather, bind up their wounds, take a load off, and just sort of say, wow, we made it. We're alive. And the story is that here, under this great big tree, which you see right here, and it's still there today. I've seen it. I've visited it. It's how, God knows how old. It's at least 600-700 years old, because it was probably a couple of hundred years old then. Might be 1,000, 2,000 years old. Who knows? But anyway, under this big tree, which is known as Arbol de la Noche Triste, the tree of the sad night, Cortes sat down and cried like a baby. I lost the city of gold. Wow, right? But after he got the crying out of his system, he rallied, got back on his horse, got his men together, and they got out of there. Because he may have been down, as they say in boxing, but he most certainly was not out. Okay, so what does he do? Mexico City, the escape, and they go like this, through these various cities, around the Lake of Mexico, way off in the boondocks, through the foothills, over the mountains, all the way to Tlaxcala. Okay? Cortes gets his Indian allies, and they head by this very circuitous route all the way back there. And the whole way he's thinking and plotting and laying out his plan for how to beat the Aztecs and win. He spends a few months really figuring things out, and he sees that he's got about 200,000 men to the Aztecs' 125,000. He didn't know the exact numbers, but he had a good sense. He decides to relocate his forces, okay, from here to Texcoco. Okay, Texcoco de Mora. All right? That's the best place for a base of operations because he wants to construct a navy. And so he needs to be closer to the lake. All right? He establishes a shipyard back here in the foothills where no Aztec spies will get wise to what he's doing. And up there, he has a fleet of brigantines constructed, all built in sections, so they can be easily carried down a few miles. Okay, he's got a shipyard up here. They're going to be built in sections. The sections can be carried down a few miles and then like put together into ships, because right here, 8,000 slaves have constructed a 5-mile canal down to the lake. So the ships will be put together and floated on down to the lake here. Right? Meanwhile, he's been shoring up alliances with all the other cities around the lake, isolating the Aztecs, so that when he attacks, they will have no one to call upon for assistance. These preparations, from the time of La Noche Triste to the time of Cortes's final assault on Tenochtitlan, will take 1 full year. Okay? Now, during the time that Cortes is making these preparations, the Aztecs have not been idle. They have selected a new Tlatoani, an emperor, Cuauhtemoc, a warrior. No churched-up mystical visionary like Montezuma, may he rest in peace. Okay? But a man to meet the moment, a macho. Okay? They are not exactly preparing for Cortes's great naval attack, because they can't know that that's coming, not because their spies haven't figured out, but because they can't even imagine what he's going to do. They can't even imagine a navy like he's putting together. All they know about are canoes. They don't know about ships like brigantines, okay? But they do know that there will be further conflict with the Spanish and their Indian allies, because they know that Cortes and his Tlaxcalans and Otomi are encamped at Texcoco, and they can see that he is peeling off the cities of the Lake of Mexico and binding them into his new alliance. So during this year, the Aztecs are doing their best to prepare for an assault that they know is coming, training their warriors, shoring up their defenses, and doing everything they can to be ready for something which had never before occurred, a full-scale assault upon Tenochtitlan. Under normal circumstances, the capital city of the empire was well nigh impregnable. Okay? The causeways could be easily defended, and the connecting wooden bridges could be removed if need be. The Indians only used canoes for movement by water, so an attack across the lake did not even lie within the realm of the imaginary. The city had a constant resource of fresh water and a tremendous reserve of food in its granaries. Aside from this, there was no conception of siege warfare in Mesoamerica, so any initiation of this would have been the first of its kind, and to test it at Tenochtitlan would have made it seem like the worst idea in the history of warfare. But these were not normal circumstances, and it really didn't even matter that the Spanish had a navy unlike anything the Indians of Mesoamerica had ever seen or even imagined. The really decisive factor in the siege of Tenochtitlan was the appearance of smallpox amongst the Aztecs. a few weeks prior to the attack of Cortes. The Aztecs, and all of the Native American peoples for that matter, had no immunities to any of the crowd diseases of the Old World. Some one or more of the Spaniards were carriers of the smallpox germ, but were themselves immune to it. All of the Spaniards were immune to it. They had built up immunities, okay? Meaning they were not broken out with the sores and sick, the carrier that I'm talking about, but they could transmit the disease to those who were susceptible to it, meaning all the Indians. So through the exchange of bodily fluids, the germ got loose amongst the Aztecs. You know, this one Spaniard, the carrier, had sex with one Indian, some woman. She had sex with 2 or 3 other men, or just her husband. The husband kissed his kids on the mouth. You know, they kissed their little friend. Like, it spread, okay? Anyway, okay, it took some time to gestate and spread. Who knows precisely why it took X amount of time? No one. But at any rate, as luck would have it, and holy cow, guys, if you think back to the lecture and you think about a variety of things I've talked about, Cortes was like the luckiest cat in history. Right as he's readying his attack, the epidemic is just then ravaging the entire city. The Florentine Codex, where this image comes from, this image of these Aztecs sick with smallpox, okay? It was written by Aztec scholars alive at the time that this was happening. The Codex says that so many were ill that there was no one who could raise a hand to help another. Like at a certain point, every single person was sick in the city. Now think about the sickest you've ever been in your life. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister. How many people in your house could take care of you? Now imagine that every single person in your house was as sick as you were, and your neighbors, and your extended family, and every single person in the city. Okay? That's what it was. The death toll was something like 25 to 35%. So how much resistance could the Aztecs really put up when the attack began? They were going to lose one way or another due to Cortes's overwhelming advantages. But then, after their population is decimated by smallpox, how they must have thought their gods had forsaken them. Think about the psychological effect of that, the emotional effect of that, and now you got to rally it up and try to fight this army with these overwhelming advantages in terms of numbers, technology, navy, and okay. Well, here you can see it's a very strange painting in terms of perspective with the causeways into the city, right? The aqueduct bringing fresh water out of the hills and the mountains, but you can see the attack on the city, the conquest of Mexico by Cortes. I don't know which artist painted this. I haven't been able to find it out in my research on the internet, but anyway. An image from the Florentine Codex, okay? The brigantines attack across the causeway with the wooden connecting bridge from the causeway to the land. Aztec defenders here, Spanish and Indian warriors attacking. This is interesting. This is actually an image out of one of the codices, okay, showing, right, again, these attacks on the city. And this is a scale model of one of the brigantines built, okay, by the Spanish and their Indian allies to attack the Aztecs. You get a sense of what one of these ships actually looked like. And again, images from the codices giving you a sense of what this scenario was. Okay, here's a detail from a mural by Diego Rivera, right? The Spaniards in their steel armor with their weapons, a cannon, right? The Indians, Spanish priests in the background, painting by T.H. Robinson. Siege of Tenochtitlan by an unknown artist. The Aztecs, Eagle warriors, or Macaw warriors, I'm not sure. The Spanish conquistadors. Indian allies. Another one is off Pinterest. Some contemporary artists. Pretty powerful graphic image. The storming of the Teocalli, the Temple of the Gods, by Cortes and his troops, by Emanuel Lutze, a German artist from the 1800s. Well, anyway, Cortes and his forces attack by land and by sea, and ultimately they're able to fight their way not only to but through Tenochtitlan from one end to the other. But the Aztecs make it no easy task. They pull away all of the wooden bridges crossing the canals, just as they did on La Noche Triste. So the Spanish used gunpowder to blow up the buildings, and the rubble is used to fill in the canals, hauled in by the thousands of Indians they have with them. So even as they win Tenochtitlan, they're laying waste to it, they're destroying it, street by street, acre by acre. And by the time they were done, there was almost no building left standing, almost no remnant of perhaps the most magnificent city on earth. I mean, imagine this. As you advance through this city, you look behind you, and almost everything that you've conquered is gone except for piles of rubble and the remains of buildings. And of course, it wasn't the city that they wanted per se. It was the loot, the treasure, and control of the empire, which represented wealth in hundreds of different ways. But nonetheless, the loss of Tenochtitlan eats at my guts like a cancer. Cortes had approximately 200,000 Indian allies, and at least 100,000 were Tlaxcalans, and maybe as many of them, 130,000, 140,000 were Tlaxcalans. They were the backbone of the army to beat the Aztecs. And the awesome mural by Xochitl that I've showed you previously has several really stirring panels in it that show the Tlaxcalans reveling in their final mastery over their former Aztec overlords. Here's one of those panels. And you know, it's interesting because to this day, most Mexicans, they see the Tlaxcalans as kind of like traitors. You know, like in the United States, you call somebody a traitor, you call him a Benedict Arnold, because Benedict Arnold went over to the British side during the American Revolution. He betrayed the American colonists, the patriots that were fighting for independence, you know, and sided with the British. And that's the way that Mexicans see the Tlaxcalans. You know, but the Tlaxcalans, when you look at this mural, you know, they see it differently. They see themselves as having fought against the Aztecs that conquered them. It's like this very complicated thing. But anyway, when you look at this mural, it's, you know, it's very clear that, yeah, they see things differently, you know. But anyway, here you have another great panel from the mural, the Aztec patron god Huitzilopochtli being cast down from the sky by Cortes, even as Tenochtitlan burns beneath him, right? And here's an even closer in detail of that part of the mural. See the destruction of Tenochtitlan and the Tlaxcalan and Otomi armies marching down here. This is a mural, a tile mosaic from East LA, actually, where you see these two Aztec warriors. You know, this guy's basically just given up, and he's sort of trying to face up to this, you know, Aztec conquistador on a kind of Pegasus, who's like at one with the sun, right? It's like a sun god coming down out of the sky to lay waste to like the rubble of Aztec civilization, all broken into like blocks. It's like been broken apart. These last two Aztec warriors like, trying to stop the end from coming. Now, Cuauhtemoc, the last Tlatoani of the Aztecs, was captured and held captive against the possibility of a revolt. Cortes had no idea what might happen down the road and decided better safe than sorry. Cuauhtemoc kept the title of emperor, but everyone knew he was nothing but a prisoner. When the Spanish could not find as much gold and other treasure as they thought they would, and they found a lot, I mean, an unbelievable amount, they tortured him to get him to reveal the secret hiding place of the rest of the loot. They just assumed there was one. But he gave them nothing. They burned his feet. You can see this here, right? Cuauhtemoc's feet being burned. And they tortured other noblemen as well. 5 years later, in 1525, Cortes, restless, took Alvarado and an army on an epic campaign south all the way into Honduras, looking for more gold and conquest. He brought Cuauhtemoc and some other Aztec nobles with him because he was afraid if left behind they might somehow rally and revolt and seize control from the Spaniards that had been left in control of the colony. Later that year in the Mayan city of Itzamcanac, Cortes was led to believe that Cuauhtemoc and several other of the Aztec nobles were plotting to have him killed. He received this information from one of the other Aztec noblemen. Okay, now Cortes had the accused interrogated, and when no confessions were forthcoming, he then had them hung. Supposedly, Cuauhtemoc's last words to Cortes were as follows: "Now I understand your false promises and the kind of death you have had in store for me. You are killing me unjustly. May God demand justice from you, as it was taken from me when I entrusted myself to you in my city of Mexico." Thus died the last Aztec Tlatoani, far from his people, far from home, buried in the jungle in an unmarked grave. It seems to me in many ways that the Aztecs were not well and truly defeated until the death of Cuauhtemoc. Montezuma was a mystic, but Cuauhtemoc was a war chief, elevated to the position of Tlatoani at the moment of the Aztecs' greatest need and in their direst hour. So long as he lived, there was a chance that he might rally some sort of resistance that could win the day again for the Aztecs. But with his death, all possibility of regaining what was lost fell into wrack and ruin. To the left is the last speech of Cuauhtemoc, delivered one night in the Zocalo, several weeks before the final defeat of the Aztecs at the hands of the forces of Cortes. It is in Spanish and in Nahuatl. How many Aztecs were left at this point to defend Tenochtitlan? 10,000, 20, 30,000? We have no way of knowing. But they all gathered to hear what the emperor had to say to them. And what he said was the following: "Our sun has gone down. Our sun has been lost from view and has left us in complete darkness. But we know it will return again, that it will rise again to light us anew. But while it is there in the mansion of silence, let's join together, let's embrace each other, and in the very center of our being, hide all that our hearts love, and we know is the great treasure. Let us hide our temples, our schools, our sacred soccer game, our youth centers, our houses of flowery song, so that only our streets remain. Our homes will enclose us until our new sun rises. Most honorable fathers and most honorable mothers, may you never forget to guide your young ones, teach your children while you live, how good it has been and will be. Until now, our beloved Anahuac sheltered and protected our destinies, that our ancestors and our parents enthusiastically received and seeded in our being. Now we will instruct our children how to be good. They will raise themselves up and gain strength, and as goodness make real their great destiny in this, our beloved mother, Anahuac." Okay, so what's he saying? Well, first of all, our sun has gone down. Remember that the Aztecs believed that the world had been created and destroyed 4 times previously, and that they were living in the 5th age of the world, and that they referred to each age of the world as a sun. So Cuauhtemoc is saying, our age of the world, our sun, the 5th sun, is ending. And we're being left in darkness. But it'll return again, it'll rise again. In other words, The world has been born and has died 4 times previously, and now the 5th son, which was born, is dying. But the 6th son will come. Until that happens, until the son is reborn, let's hide inside of ourselves everything that our hearts love and that we know is a great treasure. Let's hide our temples, our schools, our ball game, our youth centers, our houses of flowery song, which means our poetry. Because for the Aztecs, poetry was philosophy, it was knowledge, it was everything. In other words, let's hide everything that matters to us. Let's hide our culture, our whole identity. Let's hide everything that we are. And then he says, fathers and mothers, don't forget to raise your children right. Teach them how good it has been. Teach them our history. Teach them who we are. Don't let them forget all that. And don't forget to remind them how good it will be again. Until now, Anahuac, which is the world around us, and that means the physical world. To the north, geographically, a certain distance, and to the south, geographically, a certain distance, and to the ocean on the west and the east, that was Anahuac. Anahuac sheltered and protected our destinies. Okay? Now we will instruct our children how to be good, and they'll raise themselves up and gain strength, and as goodness make real their great destiny in Anahuac. In other words, they'll survive. We'll survive. And then loop it all the way around to the beginning again until the sun rises again. And when he says, let's hide all the things that matter to us, a lot of historians believe that what happened that very night is that the Aztecs took as many of the sacred items that were left to them, and they left the city by hidden routes on the causeways, and they buried those things in places around the Valley of Mexico, in caves and in pits that they dug. And actually, they buried some of those things, maybe not that night, but even previously, they buried them down under the streets of Tenochtitlan. And the reason they believe this is because in the centuries since the conquest, these things have been dug up. They've been located accidentally. They've just been found. Statues, okay, great monumental pieces of architecture. The sunstone, which most people think of as the calendar stone, the Cuauhtemoc, okay, that was found under the streets of Mexico City. The statue I showed you a little while ago of Cuauhtemoc with the rattlesnake heads was found under the streets of Mexico City. They found dozens of major artifacts right under the center of Mexico City within a couple of 100 yards maximum of where Cuauhtemoc made this speech. When they're digging out subways and the foundations of major skyscrapers and the cathedral and things like that, they found these artifacts down right under the streets and the sidewalks of Mexico City. And they think the best theory is that this happened because Cuauhtemoc said, take all these things, hide these things, okay, until the new sun comes again. This is a powerful speech intended to rally his people's hopes towards the future, even as he knew that they could not prevail in their struggle to save themselves and their city. We will rise again. Our sun will rise again. These are the kind of things that any great leader would say under these sort of circumstances. But as he stood there in the war-ravaged remnants of Tenochtitlan, Cuauhtemoc could not know that the Aztecs would never rise again and that their sun had set forever. The totality of their defeat could not have been clear to him at that point. He could not know that their world had come to an end. Now, a momentary pause. For maximum dramatic effect from this point forward, I suggest the following. Open another window in your browser and go to YouTube and search for the Neil Young song Cortes the Killer. Put it on low. Start the song playing. You want to hear it, but it's going to get louder when Neil and Frank's guitars really let loose later in the song, so you don't want it to drown out my voice. In the original version of this video lecture, I had it recorded at the end of the video, but then YouTube took it down due to copyright infringement. Don't think Neil Young would have minded since it's for educational purposes, but anyway, it violated YouTube's user policies. So there wasn't much I could do about it. But I had a lot of students tell me they thought it really enhanced the last couple of minutes of the lecture. They sent me emails, said, oh, I was really bitching when you did this, whatever. So now to get the effect, I've got to pause a moment here and suggest you do this. If you like. If you don't want to, you could just continue on without the song. Okay? Now, once the defeat of the Aztecs was assured, the Spanish set about destroying every last remnant and vestige of Tenochtitlan. Every building, every monument, and statue were smashed or blown to smithereens to better prepare for the construction of Mexico City, the new capital of the colony of Nueva España, or New Spain. Here you have a kind of like one at the same time as like a painting and almost like a map, not with street names and everything, but you get the idea of what Mexico looked like in the early 1600s, about 100 years after the conquest. Okay, here's the Zocalo here, okay, or no, here, all right, with the cathedral, and actually the ruins of Tenochtitlan are right over here. Okay, like there's like just like remnants, like the shattered foundations of it, but buried under like a kind of garbage dump at the time, interestingly, but whatever. And here's the lake. Slowly but surely, the lake is going to dry up, and Mexico City is going to end up spreading out over and ultimately covering up almost the entire lake, like I said earlier. But okay. Yeah. Did I just say all this? Yeah, every building, monument, and statue were smashed or blown to smithereens to better prepare for the construction of Mexico City, which is going to be the new capital of the colony of Nueva España, or New Spain. Okay? And Mexico City, the Mexico City of today, is magnificent. Okay? It's a vital and impressive showpiece of Mexican civilization. I mean, it's really a spectacular city. If you've never been there, I really can't recommend enough. It's a place that you really should visit. But what of the other great cities of the world? Cities of history, of mind, of heart, and of the imagination. What of Dubai? Metropolis, Petra, Tikal, London, Rome, Gotham City, Shanghai, Cairparavel, Rio de Janeiro, Bravos, New York, El Dorado, Paris, Moscow, Atlantis, Constantinople, San Francisco, the Emerald City, Machu Picchu, Berlin, Shangri-La, Luxor, Minas Tirith, Tokyo, Prague, Gondolin. You can visit these cities, travel to them, eat their food, experience their culture, either physically or through the time-traveling and reality-bending machinery of your imagination. Metropolis and Atlantis, Oz and Gotham City are totally alive. in the movies and television shows, comic books and video games that entertain us. New York and Moscow, Dubai and Tokyo are real physical cities that you can drive or sail to, fly or rail to, anytime, even today. As soon as you're done with this lecture, if you choose, all you need is a credit card and a passport. But of all the great cities of the world, only Tenochtitlan was eradicated, wiped off the face of the earth, so entirely that there is no movie, no television show that depicts it, and there's no visiting anything but the tiniest pieces, the shattered fragments of its ruins. The great majority of people in the world really have never even heard its name. What might it have become? What would it look like today? If the conquest had never played out as a Spanish victory, if the Aztecs had impossibly won as a major modern metropolis, what would Tenochtitlan look like by day or by night? There's really no way of knowing. Because the city that was, in its time, the greatest city in the world, is now only the ghost of a memory, roaming the back streets and alleyways of Mexico City and haunting the dreams of its people. Sad, but true. Alright guys, that's it. I'll see you next time.